Maya Thompson's shoes clicked against the polished marble floor as she approached the West Wing press entrance just before 10 a.m. Her crisp blazer bore the emblem of the Capitol Tribune, and her press badge, stamped and revalidated only days earlier, hung confidently at her hip. For years, she had sifted through government flak's talking points and forced reluctant officials to answer the toughest questions. Today, she intended to press the press secretary on new surveillance measures quietly rolled out by the administration. At the glass doors, a uniformed Secret Service officer paused, rifling through a clipboard. Maya offered her credentials. The officer's eyes flicked to hers, then to the paper. "Ms. Thompson," he said, voice polite but uneasy. "I'm sorry. Your credentials have been suspended pending a security review." Her heart skipped. Suspended? On what grounds? Maya asked, keeping her tone measured. She had never before been turned away. The officer shook his head. I'm not authorized to say. You'll receive notice in writing." Before she could protest, he stepped aside, and a second agent closed the door behind her. In the sudden silence of the empty corridor, Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. She stood alone, barred from the very press room where she'd spent countless mornings pressing pencils against paper, scribbling notes as New York-style reporters jockeyed for position. A dozen fellow correspondents filed past through the next door, glancing back with pity or thinly veiled indifference. None spoke. Moments later, Maya called her editor from a hallway payphone. Her voice, usually crisp with authority, trembled only once. "They've revoked my badge. No explanation." In response, her editor's warmth crackled through the line. "Get back here. We'll fight this. You're not alone." By noon, the Capitol Tribune ran a front-page headline. "Journalists suspended. No cause given." Social media lit up with solidarity. Number-free Maya Thompson trended among press freedom advocates. Inside her newsroom, colleagues affirmed their support. Tech staff scoured email logs for any hint of a warning. But Maya's inbox remained empty. No email from the White House liaison. No automated message. No memo at all. That evening, Maya sat on the windowsill of her apartment overlooking the city's glowing spires. Her notebook lay open on her lap, blank except for 4 words at the top of the page. Denied entry, demanding answers. The air was thick with the promise of rain, but she felt only the cool rush of determination. If the administration would not explain, she would uncover every hidden directive, every off-the-books memorandum that led to her exclusion. Tomorrow, she resolved, she would follow the trail wherever it led, even into the shadows beneath the White House itself. Because press freedom, she knew, was not a privilege granted by power, but a right reserved for those who refused to remain silent. Maya spent the next morning sifting through every fragment of information she could gather about her sudden exclusion. She pored over her email headers, scanned her press liaison's calendar for any unexplained entries, and retraced her steps through the White House complex, only to find every checkpoint and security camera logged her arrival without incident. Frustration mounting, she reached out to Talib, a veteran photojournalist who still held unconventional clearance as a contractor. Under cover of midday traffic, they slipped into a little-known corridor behind the press office and copied security badge logs for the past 2 weeks. It was Talib who first spotted the anomaly. On 3 consecutive mornings, Maya's badge had attempted to scan the outer press door, then been flagged at exactly 9:58 a.m., just before the briefing room opened at 10. Those failed scans were annotated with the terse code HLD, a designation Maya had never seen. "Hold," Talib muttered, tapping the touchscreen. "Someone quietly put you on a watch list." Their eyes met, and Maya knew this was more than an administrative screw-up. Following that lead, Maya filed a FOIA request for any records containing the term HLD in the Secret Service and White House liaison offices. Weeks later, she received heavily redacted memos, envelopes stained with black marker. But one line stood clear: temporary suspension, authorized via NCC directive. NCC, she realized, was the National Communications Council, a shadowy interagency body rumored to coordinate press strategy behind closed doors. Determined to learn more, Maya turned to her friend and tech whiz Marcus Nguyen. In his cramped apartment, surrounded by blinking server racks, he bypassed the NCC's firewall to recover deleted email drafts. On a password-protected server, they uncovered the draft of an internal memo titled Press Management High-Risk Subjects. Maya's name appeared under the header, alongside 24 other reporters flagged as uncooperative or excessively probing. The memo instructed staff to minimize exposure and adjust credentials accordingly, a clear blueprint for her barring. Armed with this evidence, Maya arranged a clandestine meeting with Carla Ruiz, a former NCC deputy who'd resigned in protest months earlier. In a dimly lit cafe off Pennsylvania Avenue, Carla slid over a thick manila envelope. "They call it Operation Alignment," she whispered, fear flickering in her eyes. "Every morning we got a list of targeted journalists, and every evening we erased their access." Inside the envelope were photocopies of meeting minutes, strategic plans, and budgets, allocating federal funds to covert PR firms hired to shape headlines. Maya's pulse pounded as she exhaled. The conspiracy reached far beyond a simple credential freeze. It was a systematic effort to control the national narrative and silence dissent. She spent the rest of the night compiling a timeline. August 12th, NCC meeting approves alignment initiative. August 14th, first credentials flagged. September 3rd, draft memos sent to Secret Service. With each date, her story grew more explosive and more dangerous. By dawn, Maya had mapped out her next move. She would publish the NCC memo and Carla's testimony in full, then use the public uproar to demand an independent investigation. She drafted her exposé's lead paragraphs, her fingers flying over the keyboard as the city skyline outside her window shifted from navy blue to pale gray. Above it all, she wrote 4 words that would become her rallying cry: "Silence is complicity." Tomorrow, Maya would deliver the document dump to her editor and to every watchdog organization and civil rights lawyer ready to carry the fight into the courts. Because if someone could weaponize credentials to stifle the truth, then uncovering and exposing that weapon was the only way to restore the light of a free press. Maya's heart raced as she slipped into a quiet corner of the shadow-lit cafe on 14th Street, her satchel pressed tightly against her side. Across the table sat Carla Ruiz, former deputy at the NCC, her fingers trembling slightly as she spread a stack of photocopied documents between them. The din of clinking glasses and muffled conversation faded into the background. Here, every word would matter. Every word. Carla leaned forward, voice low. "They call it Operation Alignment," she began. "It started 6 months ago when senior White House strategists decided to clamp down on anyone asking uncomfortable questions. I helped draft the first list. 28 reporters flagged for excessive scrutiny. You were at the top." She tapped one of the memos, its header stamped "Top Secret/Comment." After every briefing, they'd compare transcripts to our target list. If your name appeared more than once challenging the narrative, you'd be HLD'd, held out of the room until you stopped digging. Maya felt a cold wash of vindication and outrage. She scanned the pages, planning calendars detailing daily briefing objectives, emails instructing liaison officers to deflect or deny before accommodating any FOIA requests, budget authorizations for off-the-books PR firms tasked with seeding disinformation about dissenting journalists. Each line confirmed what she had long suspected. Her exclusion was no accident, but a calculated strategy to silence her voice. Carla's gaze flicked to the door, paranoia in her eyes. "They monitor our cell phones, our emails, and even our bar tabs. I had to resign when I refused to add names to the new list targeting local reporters." She pulled a crumpled flash drive from her jacket, sliding it across the table. "This contains unredacted meeting minutes from every NCC session over the past year. It's all here. Directives signed by the communications director approving each barring decision." Maya slid the drive into her pocket, feeling its weight like a live wire. She asked Carla for clarifications. Who signed off on her suspension? Where the final memo was stored? How many reporters had endured weeks of silent freezing? Carla rattled off names, liaison officers, senior press aides, even a deputy national security advisor. Then pressed a final warning. "They'll come after you too if they find out. Keep this tight until we decide on a public release strategy." Later that night, back in her apartment, Maya decrypted the drive under the soft glow of her desk lamp. Line by line, she cataloged the conspirators, their meeting dates, the precise language used to authorize credential holds, the references to safeguarding the narrative, and eliminating dissent at the source. As the early hours approached, she drafted the outline of her exposé, beginning with her own barring as the tip of a vast, systematic silencing campaign. By sunrise, Maya knew her path forward would be perilous, but Carla's courage had given her the evidence she needed to transform rumors into unassailable fact. With the whistleblower's warning echoing in her mind, Maya resolved to publish the NCC's darkest secrets, exposing the operation in full daylight and igniting a fight no administration could smother. No sooner had Maya's exposé shattered the NCC's clandestine press control ring than the first wave of retaliation crashed over her. Within hours of publication, anonymous news sites began churning out hit pieces accusing her of fabricating evidence. One viral article claimed her whistleblower, Carla Ruiz, was a disgruntled former staffer with a grudge, sweetly ignoring the mountain of verifiable documents Carla had supplied. Social media became a battleground of fury. Dozens of bot accounts amplified a single doctored quote, spliced from Maya's off-the-record remarks at a private event, recast to brand her as anti-administration propagandist. Trolls swarmed her Twitter feed, dredging up decade-old tweets and photos from her student days, twisting them into proof of bias. Every time Maya tried to correct the record, her clarifications were buried under a deluge of retweets and comments. Even mainstream outlets, fearful of losing White House access, ran tepid both sides pieces that lent credence to the smear. Inside her own newsroom, pressure mounted. Advertisers threatened to pull funding. A senior editor warned Maya that continued coverage risked the paper's White House berth. Colleagues urged caution. Maybe step back until this blows over? But Maya refused to cede the narrative. She began carrying a laminated copy of the NCC meeting, minutes to every editorial conference, reminding decision-makers that this was not idle gossip, but a federal abuse of power. Meanwhile, the NCC's covert spin doctors redoubled their efforts. They fed pro-government influencers a steady drip of insider rumors, alleging that Maya's reporting had led to a national security breach. Anonymous sources claimed she had endangered confidential communications by leaking classified agendas, an outrageous lie, but one that trended for days in right-wing echo chambers. Maya watched it all unfold from her apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating exhausted lines on her face. She took a single, steadying breath, then drafted a blistering editorial, a point-by-point refutation of each smear, complete with hyperlinks to original documents and sworn affidavits. She pressed publish, knowing it would reignite the firestorm, but also trusting that truth, meticulously sourced, would outlast manufactured lies. The next morning, as the smear narrative began to fray under the weight of her evidence, a surprising turn arrived. Several high-ranking White House aides publicly distanced themselves from the NCC's tactics, demanding an investigation. In the face of Maya's relentless pushback and the public's growing skepticism, the smear campaign began to collapse, its architects exposed by the very transparency they had tried to suppress. At last, the story shifted from her alleged misconduct to the administration's calculated assault on the free press, just as Maya had always intended. That night, Maya sat alone in her editing bay, the glow of her monitor illuminating a growing stack of NCC documents. She had spent days chasing whispers and half-truths. Now, at last, Marcus's decryption tools had cracked the final layer of the NCC's hidden server. On her screen lay a folder stamped Operation Phoenix, a code name Maya had never encountered. Inside were internal memos, budget spreadsheets, and email threads revealing the true scope of the conspiracy. A coordinated effort to suppress investigative journalists, skew public opinion, and channel federal funds into shadow PR networks. She clicked through the memos, meeting minutes signed by the White House Communications Director, explicitly authorizing credential suspensions for high-threat reporters and instructing liaison officers to deploy disinformation assets against any outlet that refused to toe the party line. A spreadsheet laid out monthly expenditures, hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled to consulting firms whose only charge was to shape headlines in key battleground states. Another file detailed Operation Phoenix Phase 2, plans to embed influencers in local newsrooms and neutralize unfavorable coverage through AstroTurf campaigns on social media. Maya's pulse quickened. This was the smoking gun, not a murky memo, but a self-incriminating blueprint for a nationwide attack on press freedom. She copied the entire dossier onto encrypted flash drives, then arranged an emergency video call with her editor, Lana Reyes. As Lana's eyes widened over the pixelated feed, Maya walked her through the evidence, clicking to display each damning page. "This isn't just targeting me," Maya whispered. "They've built a machinery to silence every inconvenient voice." By dawn, the Capital Tribune homepage bore the world's most explosive scoop, the full text of Operation Phoenix, unredacted. Simultaneously, Maya transmitted the files to the Department of Justice, the Senate Judiciary Committee, and a coalition of press freedom NGOs, ready to file immediate FOIA lawsuits. Within hours, the story engulfed every major news outlet. Operation Phoenix had become a household name. Across Washington, senior aides scrambled. The White House issued a terse statement claiming no knowledge of the NCC's tactics, even as Justice Department subpoenas rattled conference room doors. In a televised briefing, the Attorney General acknowledged receipt of the evidence and pledged a thorough, impartial investigation into the misuse of federal resources and the suppression of the First Amendment. Standing on the Tribune's balcony as the city stirred to life, Maya realized the fight had reached a critical inflection point. The classified revelation of Operation Phoenix had shattered the facade of administrative deniability, and now the perpetrators would have nowhere left to hide. With the machinery of government under unprecedented legal and public scrutiny, Maya knew that exposing the truth was only the beginning of reclaiming a free and fearless press. Within days of Maya's classified expose, the machinery that had silenced her began to implode. A federal grand jury convened in Washington under a rare October moon, and the Justice Department issued subpoenas to the National Communications Council's top brass. Search warrants were executed at the NCC's austere headquarters and at the private residences of two senior White House aides. Overnight, the council's offices were emptied of files and computers, its corridors echoing with the click of evidence carts. As cameras captured agents hauling out stacks of Operation Phoenix dossiers, senators on the Judiciary Committee flexed new muscle. In an emergency session, they voted unanimously to dissolve the NCC in its current form, stripping it of any authority over press coordination. Draft legislation, co-sponsored by lawmakers from both parties, mandated that any future interagency communications body operate under full transparency, publish its meeting schedules, and open its budget to public inspection. Meanwhile, indictments fell like thunderclaps. 3 senior NCC directors and 2 contracted PR executives were charged with conspiracy to violate First Amendment protections and embezzlement of federal funds. News director liaisons who had implemented the credential freezes quietly resigned. Those who refused were escorted from their offices in handcuffs. One veteran press officer, tearfully apologizing to a gathered crowd of reporters, admitted, "I thought I was following orders, but I see now that silence is not neutrality. It is complicity." Across the country, state legislatures raced to codify the Thompson Amendment into law, guaranteeing every accredited journalist an expedited hearing before any credential suspension. Governors signed these measures in packed ceremonies alongside Maya and her editor, Lana Reyes, who reminded the crowd that no single journalist should ever again be sidelined by secret orders. In the echo of departing NCC agents and the flash of cameras at every courthouse, Maya felt a profound shift take hold. The system she had exposed was not merely broken, it was shattered. In its place rose a new architecture of accountability, one built on the principle that a free press is not a privilege granted by power, but a right enshrined in law. And as the final indictments were read into the record, Maya realized that her solitary struggle had unleashed a reckoning vast enough to transform the very foundations of government transparency. In the year that followed the NCC's dismantling, Maya Thompson watched the newsroom transform around her. The Capitol Tribune's lobby now displayed a bronze plaque, etched with the words, "In honor of uncensored inquiry," a permanent reminder of the battle they had won. The press entrance at the White House reopened under new regulations, wall-to-wall glass doors, digital badge logs visible to reporters, and a public kiosk listing pending credential reviews, ensuring no one could be barred in secret again. Maya spearheaded the Thompson Press Freedom Foundation, endowing grants for investigative teams and legal defense funds to protect any journalist facing wrongful suspension. Fellowship applicants from local papers to international bureaus recounted how her exposé had restored hope. One Afghan correspondent credited her fellowship with saving his career when his government threatened to strip his credentials. Another, a young reporter in Detroit, used foundation support to expose environmental abuses in her city. Each year, Maya hosted the foundation's symposium at the museum wing, dedicated to press history, where visitors could trace the ripple effects of Operation Phoenix, from courtroom reforms to UNESCO declarations on media rights. Across the federal government, a cascade of reforms took root. Every newly appointed press liaison signed an oath of transparency. Annual audits by independent ombudsmen ensured compliance, and bipartisan legislation enshrined the right to immediate redress in any credential controversy. In newsrooms nationwide, Thompson clauses appeared in employment contracts, guaranteeing newsroom backing against any undue encroachment by private or public powers. Editorial boards invoked her example whenever access was threatened, uniting even erstwhile rivals in defense of open inquiry. On the 5th anniversary of her original bearing, Maya returned to the West Wing press gate for a ceremony attended by journalists, past and present. As she stepped forward to cut a ceremonial ribbon, she heard the familiar click of her own press badge opening the door without hesitation, an almost poetic echo of the denial that had set her path. Beyond those doors, a new generation of reporters clustered in the briefing room, confident that no hidden directive could ever again extinguish their right to ask, to probe, and to illuminate. In the quiet moments that followed, Maya penned her final column on the saga, a tribute to the courage of whistleblowers, the perseverance of allies, and the unbreakable bond between a free press and a free people. As that column went to print and her pen stilled, she knew that although powers rise and fall, the legacy of unyielding truth would endure, inscribed in law, in history, and in the hearts of every journalist who refused to be silenced.